Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of Advocacy Help Desk. We are a group of advocacy innovators and practitioners who've been in the business for many, many years. This show is the advocacy industry's podcast. It's a free podcast for everybody out there trying to get some new ideas, think a little bit differently. We're not going to go down the same paths that a lot of people have. I see a lot of webinars that are exactly the same across 6 different association groups or people doing different things, and I just don't really want to go that route. We'll play Robert Frost here on this help desk, and we'll get on a trail less taken. I'm here with Brian Fracken, our partners. I do want to highlight before we start the show because they help power the show and they make it free for everyone. So first I want to thank Human Factor, Blake Autham, who's doing a lot of podcasts and a lot of AV stuff right now. God bless him for associations. And of course, my partner in crime, he is in his prime, Brian Fracken with Spark Influence, who has a great background. Way to go, Brian.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Who powers FDRA's advocacy platform and database, and does a lot of other services for us as well. Known Brian for many, many years, and I'm excited today because I get to bring back my friends. So many people don't know, but Erica and Caitlin we've been friends. I don't even know how many years it's been, but we used to spend Saturdays together hanging out at friends' houses and watching football or having a bonfire or cooking or just general revelry. But I want to introduce Erica Farage, who is the Vice President for Political Affairs and Grassroots Advocacy at the International Franchise Association, who is well known, who I went to the PAC conference the last time it was in Florida, and Erica was up there getting an award at 8 a.m. And I told her I would be there at 8 a.m. and I was there at 8 a.m.
And I think that. That's friendship.
There you go. So a real innovator, recognized innovator. I just declare myself an innovator. I'm like Dr. Dre. I just award myself the titles. And I want to welcome back Caitlin Donahue, who is the Senior Vice President and Director of Digital at the Curley Company, who advise a lot of folks out there and who are helping them innovate themselves. So Caitlin, welcome back. Thank you for coming back on.
Thank you. And I'm going to be going on and off mute because Lolly Burks Donahue, my puppy, is making a lot of noise in the background. So
that's great. I mean,
love it.
We've been having interviews and conversations with our executives, and my kids are upstairs constantly. It's like Thor's hammer falling down every 5 seconds. So I completely get it. It's just the world we live in.
It is.
Where it goes. So Brian, we've been talking to a lot of people about what's happening right now in COVID. They say innovation, the mother of innovation is necessity, right? You have to innovate. There's no question about it that's in these days and times. We can't go on as usual in a number of ways, but what are you, when we kick this off today and we have 2 really important people in our industry, our advocacy industry, what's at front of mind? What are you most curious about with what they're dealing with?
Well, I think, one great article earlier this week, you were actually quoted in it, as with Tommy, as with Nick DeSarno, on sort of how associations are changing their game plans and need to change their game plans and sort of need to move quickly or else they'll be left behind. And I think one of the great things that FDRA has done, and I'd love to hear from Erica on this one, is distilling the information. We talked about this, but people are out there, they're sick of press conferences, they're sick of watching the news. What they want to know is how all of this affects their passions, right? And their passions being what they work at and what they do. And so I love how FDRA has done it. And I hear there's a great one that IFA has done about distilling that information on a daily, bi-weekly, 6-week, whatever it is, but distilling what's going on out there and how it affects their people to build that membership value, to build that trust, to be out in front of things. So Erica, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing to be that source for your folks in this time of need.
Sure. So thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. And, I think that's right in terms of a pivot, right? We at the International Franchise Association have actually seen our advocacy sort of explode over the last 3 months or so. We've actually grown our our advocate database by about 30%, which is fairly astounding. But, you know, you don't want to sort of just pound people with information. I think that everyone's been on, you know, 100 webinars at this point, and, you know, so many people are sending out, you know, daily, if not like twice daily updates, and nobody's reading that because, you know, our members are small businesses. They're trying to reopen their businesses right now, and that's really their focus. But we need to be able to help them do that and understand, you know, particularly on sort of the legislative side of things or the reopening guidance side of things, how to do that. So one thing that we've actually done is create a weekly wrap up. We're calling it Franchise Filter. And it's me, just like this, like I'm talking to you guys, talking to either, you know, someone on our government relations team, you know, a CEO, just really quickly about the news of the week, what's happening on the government relations front. Easy conversation, less than 5 minutes. People can watch the video and figure out what's happening. I'll say the other place that I think we've done well is we've created a community hub where sort of all of our COVID resources live. So if someone has a question on a specific piece of legislation or guidance or loan forgiveness, they can just go to community.franchise.org, and everything lives in one place now, to really serve as a resource hub and an advocacy hub for our members.
I love it. I love it. Caitlin, are you seeing that with a lot of the groups you're doing, is the most successful ones are really being out in front, not hiding from their members and saying, look, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. This is what you can do.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, to some extent, you know, let's address the elephant in the room, and associations have to fight for their relevancy right now. I mean, you know, organizations and industries like, you know, franchises and restaurants where I came from, they're facing serious financial, you know, shortfall. And so associations have to prove their worth. And to Erica's second point, it's also about putting content in front of them that's value add. I see a lot of organizations just pushing stuff out that no one's reading. What I love, and as a digital person, what I'm excited about is the number of association CEOs, executives like Erica, who are getting out in front on video and on podcast, because finally everyone is accepting of the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect. What we're doing right here is hopefully value add, and you know, we all have different backgrounds. Some of us have collared shirts on, some of us don't, but it's not about that anymore. And I think
my house.
Yep.
Right.
This is my house. You don't want to know what's going on over there, but I think that's what's really exciting, and that I hope, you know, I don't know, we were just talking about this, you know, before we got started. It's like, what's the new Washington look like? Is it going to be as buttoned up as it was before? I think DC's always been a really tough place to turn, but hopefully this is the new face of DC.
Yeah. Andy, I mean, I know you've been doing the same, right? Well, one, you guys have always succeeded by taking the buttoned up look away from FDRA and going to the people with just, you know, jeans and a polo on and being like, look, this is who we are. We don't need to be in a suit when we're talking footwear, right? You guys have done the same with your quick, like, kicks over coffee or 5 minutes of footwear, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here that can really surmise where we started to have our pivot. And this is probably 5 or 6 years ago. When I came back, I was on the Hill for a long time. I left to get my master's. I came back and I got this job. I never thought I would be at a footwear association. I assumed I would go back into the government, actually, at DHS or Department of State or something like that. And it was during the shutdown, it was one of the shutdowns, when everybody was going crazy. And I got this offer. The guy who runs our association is a guy I used to work with on Capitol Hill. So I got this job, and I immediately came in and I looked at what we were doing, and it was basically a monthly newsletter, and we were doing some events and workshops, and it was heavy advocacy and government relations, which is important. But I really told him, I was like, if we're in the middle of a shutdown, how many people do you think assume that we'll do anything positive, or our Congress will pass anything positive? So immediately we started to integrate in other solutions to our association, right? So we changed the way we communicate. We broke up that one monthly newsletter into different value adds based on departments or where people were or how they wanted to consume it. So I think that the challenge is one is you've got to, in this day and age, some people are doing a lot of professional development and they have no government relations. So you got to start expanding that into government relations and being that arm. Some people are all about government relations and they don't have any kind of professional development or training or products and services around that to add value. So I think when we talk about like value add and having relevancy, it's about chasing that value where your members are and not what you think they want. And some of that goes down to asking them. Radical thought, ask them, like, what do you guys need? What do we need to focus on? And I think at this point, some people will do a five-year thing. And I think almost every single year you need to be asking almost every single day, like, are we hitting our points? Are we helping you think things through a little bit differently? Are we adding new value? So I think it's expanding your products and services right now around those value adds. And then the other aspect is being accessible. So we stopped wearing suits to Portland, which sounds funny, but you get so stuck in this DC style. I mean, when you're young on Capitol Hill or you're young in advocacy, you want to dress up because it covers up those things you don't know sometimes. And you find strength in being the button-up person and looking good. And I think that's great. But I think when you go out into the field or you go out to your members where they are, Erica goes out to a franchise person, they're not wearing suits. They're out there in a uniform, right. Maybe they're in, they're whatever they are, but we got to meet them where they are in that sense. And in the same way, to the point of Erica and Caitlin talking about podcasts, we also have to meet people where they consume content, meaning some people are technical and they need Excel sheets and they need copy. Great. We should do that. Some people are audio listeners because they're doing their work and they're passively listening to a podcast that you can put out. Great. We need to do that. Some people are very visual learners, right? So, they can only really get something by a graph or by watching something and seeing somebody's emotion come through a video. We got to do that. So it's all the above. We've got to expand our product services, whether it's GR and fill in more there, or whether it's the other side and filling in more professional development, helping on that end. And then whatever we're doing, we got to tell the story, and it's got to be across all different channels. And I think if you can start to think in those terms and you start to check, it's almost like a grid, right? So it's like, do we have these values and how are we telling the story? And if you can start checking all those boxes and you fill in your whole chart, then you're doing the right thing. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, Polk, I think to your point, we've obviously talked a lot about government relations because that's kind of what we all do in the advocacy space, but there is a real focus too, I think, particularly right now for associations on, the education sort of member services side of things as well. I think that that's super important. And so I think looking at all of those different buckets and covering your bases there. And as you said, doing it in different ways. I am someone that wants to watch a short video. We still do a weekly email because some people are old school. Well, I'm calling email old school these days, but some people, still want to read that email at the end of the week. So it's about doing different things and also segmenting for your audience.
Caitlin, I'd love to hear sort of like, we talked about asking your folks what to do, right? And not being afraid to ask them what to do. I mean, what kinds of things are you seeing now with the different types of channels, the different types of information that are being shared? I mean, Erica just talked about 30% new people in the system. How would you sort of put together a plan, which is amazing. Great work, Erica. How would you put together a plan for sort of bringing them into the fold and talking to them in their way and figuring out, not just for today and tomorrow, but for next week and next year?
Yeah. Yes, Caitlin, please tell me how to do that.
First and foremost, my most recent talking point is I don't think you can plan for next year.
Okay.
I think that organizations like associations, GR communications should be planning quarter by quarter. I just got off a call with an association client before this. I said, what's our plan for the rest of this quarter? I can't tell you what's going to happen in September. we can spend a little bit of time talking about that, Polk, at the end in terms of whether or not Congress is going to even let people in the door. But and
then, or if you should have your fly-in, like ours was
have your fly-in. So short-term planning. Second is audience specific. Back to Polk's point, this idea that, you know, one size fits all, we can hit everyone with, you know, one communication, or that you send it once and they're going to read it, is not true. So it's all about identifying the different audiences. For a lot of government affairs and public affairs groups, it's, you know, not only is it your members, but it's members of the media, it's members of Congress. And all three of those audiences get information from different places. Sometimes organizations are using one platform, which is their website or a hub, to share that with all of those different audiences. That's fine, but how you're pushing people there has to be different. We're doing a lot of quote graphics on LinkedIn. Hear me out. Some of the more basic, you know, I think sometimes this can be super basic, but, you know, we have a couple trade association CEOs who are getting great media hits, and it's like they're on, you know, they're on Fox Business, they're, you know, they've got a quote in the LA Times. Well, I don't know, maybe a handful of their members saw that article, and then they do a recap at the end of the week. So we're doing a quote graphic with the CEO's head, his or her quote, as it relates to the industry, pushing that out on LinkedIn, putting a little bit of spend behind it, and talk about member value. Yeah. Your members are seeing, like, okay, not only are we out there, but we're relevant, our voice is there. It's real easy. And so those are some of like the quick wins. But I would just say short-term strategy, audience-driven, multi-channel, back to basics, doesn't have to be super fancy.
And I mean, obviously, when we're talking about some of the stuff, people are a little bit afraid because this is more work, right? You got to do a little bit more work to get the effect that you want right now. I think everybody is working from home. So we've been talking about this for months now, right? And I think individually we've got our workflows down. We know where we're productive. We know the times of the day. We know where we have a space where we're productive, whether it's a room, whether it's the bathroom, or wherever it is. There's a space now. We've got it down. The challenge is synchronizing among all our different people in our associations and working with us in advocacy. So I think that's still a challenge. And around that challenge remains what we're talking about here is if we're planning quarter by quarter, it is more work to do that. It was easier. It was way easier before to do advocacy, to do a fly-in. Now it's going to be digital or virtual, right? Because we knew what the workflow was. We did it every year. It's almost like Congress on an appropriation schedule. I knew every year the ag bill was going to come up.
Yeah.
Your DOD bill is going to come up. So we had these schedules, and now the schedules are completely scrambled, and we have to figure out a new schedule every single quarter, and we've got to evaluate a lot more. We can't do a one-year campaign and say, we're going to do all this and do this. It's like every quarter we need to say, we're doing this. Is it working? Go ahead.
I think that's where like practitioners like us can demonstrate a lot of value. I think the audience for this podcast, Polk, is a lot of mid to senior level practitioners, not necessarily the leaders of organizations. But to your point, I think the leaders need the Ericas more now than ever before to be like, we've got to pivot. We've got to shift the direction and do this. So I think that, for our peers, it's like, now's the time to demonstrate your value because you have to. And I just don't think that some of the heads of these groups have the luxury to think about, oh yeah, that's right. We have to postpone this or that. They're just thinking about what's in front of them.
They're thinking about revenue. That's what our CEO certainly is focused on right now. I mean, it's a hard time for associations, particularly associations in, our space, restaurants, retail, hotels, service brands. I mean, we've been hit the hardest. And so, C-suite really is focused on revenue generation. And I think to your point, Kate, what we are able to do is provide other member value. And I think maybe at the beginning of this, folks almost kind of like counted out the value of advocacy. And I think, again, through the last 3 months, and as I said earlier, sort of the explosion, there is real value in representing your members, whether it's on the Hill, in states, with agencies. Like, my job is to promote, protect, and enhance the franchise business model. I think now that's more important than ever because our members are just trying to survive. We've lost over 1 million jobs in the franchise sector in the last 2 months. They're worried about survival. So we need to be worried about them and that they're actually able to do that. And that's where, the value of Advocacy comes in for our guys right now. Because they can't do that on a daily basis, right?
Right.
They can take some stab themselves, and certainly are doing so. But they're just trying to stay afloat right now.
I think some good ideas that people can think about around revenue streams, because I obviously have to look at our operations, and we look at it from event revenue, we look at it from packages, like how do we generate revenue? And it's a bit different, but I would say for all the advocacy folks out there, if you're looking to offer your boss a way to generate revenue, is people in most industries have never been more engaged on the advocacy side. And if you do it smartly and you don't hard sell, you can go to service providers and you can partner them with an executive, and you could do a series of conversations about what's happening to the industry. And what makes it valuable is if you can soften the sales pitch and not just have that service provider on your podcast or do a Zoom interview like this, but you have someone in the industry. Most people are looking for this question: what am I missing? Right? I'm doing this way in my business or our industry, and we have this model and we're doing this. Then this is the same reason why we do this show. What am I missing? Right? So if you can tell them a different way somebody's doing it or thinking or leading, there's your value. And then you add a service provider that shows what they're hearing from other industry leaders. There's your other value. And at the same time, you're charging $2,000 for the episode, and all of a sudden your advocacy program is generating revenue where your leadership never thought that could actually happen. Same with advertisements. If you're doing a newsletter, you can add in an ad in the middle, non-intrusive ad that promotes someone and some product that you believe in, and charge them $500 or $1,000. And then all of a sudden you're paying for your platforms and you're paying for your work at the same time that you're teaching and leading, and you can drop in those asks during the time. It's like, John, you've been talking about this issue, but how important is it for people to stay involved and get educated and get activated when we need to? Oh, I couldn't tell you how important it is. This association's so important to us. Da 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 da. Boom, there you go. So you just have to be a little bit more clever, and more willing to make an ask of someone who normally would sponsor an event and say, hey, we can't do the event, but everybody is watching this, this franchise filter, or everybody's reading this newsletter. We got 50% open rates. There's a huge opportunity. Do you guys want to jump in and run some ads? If not, fine, we'll find someone else that will. And then all of a sudden you're generating revenue that way.
So we did a franchise like Reopening blueprint, talking about the way our 10 different sectors could open, more safely as everyone begins to reopen. And, we've talked how we're all sick of webinars, but we have done a webinar for each of those sectors and actually gotten sponsors for those different 10 sector webinars. And people weren't really sponsoring webinars before, but it's a way to talk about what we're doing on the advocacy side and how, businesses can safely reopen and also, as you said, Polk, generate some revenue as well.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with webinars. It's just you have to be relentless about the content.
Webinars need a PR consultant.
I know, seriously.
I think that's right.
It need a rebrand.
Like a rebrand. I'm calling them virtual presentations now.
There you go.
I'm in the right universe, right?
It up, right?
Sure, right? Yeah. No, I love it. All right, so let's get to sort of the future, which is what you're touching on now, Erica, and I'm interested to hear from you, Caitlin, on this too, is Polk, I know you guys did a great job, and we've been talking about this for a while, in terms of, look, not everybody has the time right now to be able to put towards advocacy, to be able to put towards things, right? There are folks who are affected by this disease. There are folks who have family members. There are folks who are home with kids and who don't have that time. And I know FDRA has done a good job in terms of training videos for what you've missed, right? I know you guys launched that recently, and I liked that a lot, was you know what, if you have the time to participate now, that's great. If you don't have the time to participate now, we want you to be able to catch up quickly. And here's the information you need to know for what you missed over the time you might have been gone, right? And so I'm interested, Erica, it sounds like you guys are doing that as well. Caitlin, what are you seeing with folks who are starting to think about those next steps with reopening, with other pieces going on, in terms of how they're working with their communities on what may be coming down the line? I mean, we're talking about webinars and needing a rebrand. We've all been doing it. What do you see the rest of this quarter? Let's just talk about that meeting you had today. No.
Okay, let me think. I have something I'm calling pandemic brain. I've always prided myself on my memory, and I don't know what happened. So let me just take a quick second. I think, okay, so first and foremost, it's about getting out the positive stories, which I referenced, a few minutes back. I just don't think you can push them out enough and get them out in front of enough eyeballs in terms of just proving your relevancy. It goes back to like the age-old adage that I can't believe I'm going to say, but 411 versus 911. With the 411, being, information with the idea that at some point you're going to hit 911 and need them to do something for you. That age. Yep. So, I think that's what we talked about a lot on this call is what is the content we can put in front of our advocates and members right now that maybe necessarily isn't an ask, but we know we're going to have to ask them soon. And we maybe just asked them to do something a little while ago, but it's about cultivating and continuing to keep the relationships alive. But to Erica's point, not just constantly pushing information. Where we've settled is making sure that they're seeing the industry good news stories and putting those back in their feed. And
it's the why. It's not so much the what. So anybody can get the what on CNN or MSNBC, and I see a lot of people copying articles and dropping them in as if that's value add. And our goal is to translate what's happening here. It's not to parrot what is happening here.
Right.
Also, I would say to your point of sort of like, what are you missing? So we've actually done, I think to date, about 60 teletown halls with members of Congress, which
there it is again. Yes. I love it. Tell us more. Have
been super interesting. Because you are, I'm sitting here in my office and, Senator Ernst is sitting at our kitchen table, and we just had one with Senator Booker today. We have like 30 minutes of unfettered access to these members of Congress for our members in these states and districts that we've truly never had before, that we've never had, when they're running for votes on the Hill during our fly-in. Mm-hmm. That you don't even necessarily get during like a store tour because they're off to the next store tour. So they've been really helpful in terms of, members of Congress talking directly, obviously, to their constituents, and our members talking directly to members of Congress about issues that are important to franchising. And to your point, people are trying to run their business. So we've actually been recording all of them as well, and then pushing them out to our members in those states and districts so they can listen to them on their own time. So again, it's like, if you have the half an hour to call in and talk, please do. And if you don't, we were talking about passive listening, pull it up later and hear what, Senator Booker had to say today.
Right.
Yeah, I think
so that's definitely a pivot.
Yeah, for sure. And in thinking about this going forward, and we can talk about FlyIns now and visiting the Hill and what that looks like at reopening and all that. But I think the future of FlyIns has to be a hybrid. You're going to have smaller groups going, but you're also going to have virtual engagement, just like Erica was talking about. But if you can imagine a member of Congress in the district driving from event to event, they have 45 minutes of dead air time where now they can get on a Zoom call or a Skype or whatever it's going to be in the future. We don't know, but they can get on a call with a group of people and have, in essence, a fly-in on their phone during that time. So they're actually increasing their engagement locally. And you've got, people who are busy running their business actually able to take a minute and plan it and say, you know what, like I can't go to Capitol Hill this week or this month that you're flying, but if you got a couple of those digital things, I'll hop on. And it's like, great, we definitely do. We'll plug you in where we can, and we'll have a central hub back at our offices, if we go back to offices, and they'll run the digital, and we got a couple of staff up on the hill running this thing. But what do you guys think about, it's hard to really say if it's going to be fall. This is the thing. Like, I hear a lot of people like, we still have a fly and we just moved it to the fall. And it's like, I don't know where we'll be at. So, okay. It's like, it's okay to keep playing that as long as you're not investing a lot of money into it. Cause that's my fear is they've spent money at a hotel or, they booked rooms or they have the hotel ballroom or something like that. So I'm a little concerned for a lot of people on that, but we don't know what it's going to look like. And, we don't know what Congress is going to act like. If they're now allowing members to vote by proxy, are they then going to start mandating appointments on Capitol Hill? So regardless of where it's the fall or next spring when we hit an appropriation season again, and hopefully we have, something that tampers down COVID and we can feel free to reemerge in society close to what we were like. What do you guys envision advocacy looking like then face to face with members and senators and state capitals and things like that?
Want me to take it?
Yeah.
Sure, either one.
So I can say that we were supposed to have our Franchise Action Network annual meeting, which is our fly-in, the fan meeting, the second week of September. And we have made the difficult, but I think necessary decision to cancel that meeting for now. Although, from what I just said, I keep saying internally, we continue to do these town halls, teletown halls, Zoom calls with members. We'll basically have had the fan meeting by the time the fan meeting comes around. Mm-hmm. We will have hit 200 offices by the time September rolls around. So I think it's just adjusting to a new way of doing advocacy. Do I think that, at some point our members will be back up on the Hill again? Yes. But, to Caitlin's point earlier, it's really taking it quarter by quarter at this point. We don't know what that's going to look like. I definitely think it will be by appointment. That's probably a given. But it's just figuring out different ways to get, whether it's, members of Congress or, because you just said, state legislatures certainly are important to advocacy as well. And we do a lot of work in the states. Figuring out how to get our members in front of policymakers in sort of just new and different ways. Traditional fly-ins, probably a thing of the past, but there are really new, exciting and different ways to do advocacy.
Yeah, I think what's exciting about that is it's become more accessible. So when I was at the Restaurant Association, Erica, I'm sure you hear this a lot. There were lots of restaurateurs that wanted to come, but they between the flight costs, the 3 nights hotel, we would try to condense it down to 2 nights max so that they weren't spending more than $1,000 at a hotel. I mean, think about it. And especially with a bunch of recovering industries and business owners, to be able to not have to spend that money and still have that impact. I think you take some of that in terms of what Polk's talking about and you figure out, okay, well, if they were going to drop $3 or $4 grand to come to a fly-in, how can we recoup some of that money through programming and value add content, but without breaking the bank? I think that's sort of what's so exciting about, to your point, Paul, necessity being the mother of invention, is that this is disruption, and disruption is really hard. And I think, as much as we hate the phrase the new normal, there's totally going to be a new normal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Appointments on Capitol Hill. Yeah, I see it. I don't really see just random people being able to walk into offices again, but who knows? I mean, we really don't know. I think that's the crazy thing, but it's exciting. And I like sitting here in terms of just having, perspective on what's happening. I would love to know, I think this gets back to one of your other points though. And I think Erica and her team always does it really well. Is that making sure that you're connecting with your members back in other states so that you're getting the full non-DC perspective. Because we're definitely in a bubble here. And I left DC a couple weeks ago and drove up to New England to see some family, and it was like night and day. Northern Virginia and DC is not the same place as New England, because just the way different areas and industries and regions are handling it. So I just say that that's also really important as people are making plans about, what to do is talk to your members about what they're doing. That's
a great point. And I think Eric, you could speak to that too, though, because I think for our members, for shoe members, you got some states open, and so some stores are already opening, and you got other states that are still in lockdown, and you have this divergence of conversation between the two, because you got some people who are like, we got to get out here and advocate and get this thing open, and you got other people who are like, it's already open. What do I need to do? Like, I just need to run my business. And it's like, okay, like we really do have to start segmenting our conversations, because we're going to piss off half the people this way and half the people off this way. And that used to be about politics, right? So if you said something about Trump that may have been seemingly positive in some way, you piss off half the people, and the other half of people are like, you didn't say it nice enough, right? So all of a sudden we've got this sectionalism on reopenings that we have to think about and really say, we can't have a monolithic conversation with all our members. It's got to be regional and thoughtful. And again, it's hard, but it's impactful when you can say, hey, everybody in Georgia, congrats on being reopening. Just remember, stay safe out there. We're here for you as you reopen. We know you're going to be busy. We're going to touch base in a month after you're there, and we're going to have some programming. Something like that, I think, would be really meaningful and impactful, just to say we recognize you, right? So.
Yeah, it's interesting too, again, speaking specifically to franchising, most states are not Georgia. They weren't just like, everybody go back into the wild. Some of our members are, part of phase one. Some of them have been essential throughout all of this, right? Some of them are part of, phase one reopenings, with, restaurants being able to, have 50% capacity, that kind of thing. But then we have members that are what we call sort of like high touch services, right? So salons, gyms, massage chains, who, are not included until phase 2 or phase 3 in a lot of these states. So they're, and you don't know how long phase 1 is going to last at this point, or when phase 2 is going to start. So, those guys could be shut for months longer, depending on the state or even the city. So we're talking to different sectors of our members differently as it relates to different states and their reopening guidelines.
I like that a lot. We've seen that a lot with a lot of our clients as well. Is you're absolutely right, Caitlin, just using the word destruction. Of course, I mean, that is what we're seeing here. And so they're leveraging the segmentation piece and the ability to figure out the different audiences they have, the different locations they have, mix and match those, talk to different organizations in different ways, different types of organizations, as you said, the gyms versus the fast food restaurants versus the others, talk to different levels. So it's not only vertical, it's across, it's fascinating to see sort of just the level of segmentation. And that's from the most effective groups, I should say, right? The ones that are doing it right are the ones that are effectively figuring out the groups that they want to talk to, bucketing them up into those specific groups, and then speaking to them in the way that makes sense to them. Absolutely. I love it. I think this was great, guys.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know about you guys, but one, it's always fun talking to the two of you. Polk, I'm leaving you out of this, but to the two of you, it's always fun talking to the two of you. Caitlin, thanks for coming back on, of course, right? You were there with us at the beginning, and so to see sort of and hear all the great things that you're doing these days, and all the great things that you're doing with Curley Company these days is fantastic. And Erica, congrats again on that award in Florida. I wish we could all be back there. Key West was great for the PAC conference. But well-deserved, of course, for all the different work. Exactly what you're talking about is breaking things down for the people, proving that membership quarter by quarter. I've got a page full of notes here on the things you guys are doing, so I'm going to write that up. But it's really great just to hear the different ways you guys are working with these groups to get them the information they need, to show that you guys are working on their behalf, and really just be there for them right now in all the different ways you can be. And so it's awesome when we have these conversations and I can just sit back and listen and write down notes and figure out what to do next. I love it. So.
I mean, it's positive, right? It's positive because we're looking forward and we're saying things aren't great. Right? Things are a little bit harder than they used to be, but also like I'm not bored anymore like I used to be either. Like I've got to work and stuff a little bit more. and it's kind of fun, right? I mean, I would much rather be out, necessarily at a bar drinking while doing this at the time, but I can't do that. And so, sometimes we get a little too comfortable, and this will bring out some new thoughts, some new tools.
Great.
And as we kind of wrap it up, I also want to thank my friends for coming back on, and I miss you guys, and I hope we can all get together soon and sit on Matt Farage's couch and have this conversation live like we used to back in the day.
You will really be back in my home.
There it is.
But folks, I guess to summarize what we're talking about today is, if you think about going forward, we really need to focus on principles and not just the tools. I think in the digital age, people get so focused on one tool or like using this or getting trained on that. Principles allow us to kind of hop on the different lily pads in the digital stream and say, okay, like for instance, Zoom is working great now for what we're doing here, but in 6 months, something else may be better, and we'll pivot to that. And so Don't get too stuck in the way we used to do things. This is the age to really be agile and focus on the people you represent. Make sure you give them good value. Make sure you focus relentlessly on your content. Don't just parrot stuff, but translate, explain, help people a little bit. And the last bit I think we all need to have a little bit of, and we talked about unbuttoning it down, but it's some pathos. It's some real appreciation for people who are struggling right now. And we have a huge mission to be a help to those people in need. So advocacy today is more challenging than ever, but we have a huge, huge mission and impact. We can impact people more than we ever have before. So as much as this kind of is, creative destruction in some ways, and people are very fearful, I'm really optimistic about, what I see and hear from people calling us off or contacting us to say, I'm thinking about this. And it's like, just think about it. Just keep going. Think about it differently. Just keep, it's like Nike, just do it. Try something. It's fail fast and cheap, etc. So that's my wrap up for this is, every time I talk to my friends, I feel a little bit better. I miss them, but I feel better because we're all getting better at what we're doing, and we're all going to come out of the fire a lot more forged and a lot stronger. So I thank you guys for being on. I thank our audience for listening. Please go back to Advocacy Help Desk. We have all our episodes listed there. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on anywhere a podcast can be downloaded, on Spotify, on iTunes, etc. We're across the board. So you can watch us, on your desktop while you do work. You can listen to us passively. But please go back to those episodes. We've really got some really thoughtful people coming on, talking about things that I don't think most, it's an unbuttoned down show, so you never know where the idea takes you, but ideas lead to better ideas. So, of course, I want to thank my partner in crime, Brian Fracken with Spark Influence, and Blake Autham with Human Factor for all their support. And until next time, everyone, please be safe and please keep advocating.